So we're going to take a look again. Go ahead. We're going to take a look again at the chart. And if you remember, so there's a right axis and a left axis, and we said that the right and left axes together, they form the type of love called mesirah, which really means to give. That I give to the other person. And when you give, there has to be two sides to the giving. There has to be one person who's giving and the one who's receiving. Right? So the right axis is the one who's giving, and the left axis is the one who's receiving. So that's exactly what we have here. That in wisdom we have the love of a Rav for his student. So the Rav is giving to the student, so he's the giver. That's the right axis. And in Bina, in understanding, we have the love of the student for the Rav. So that's the love of the one who's receiving. First of all, this is something that I think is clear from life, but not always goes mentioned, is that to give you certainly have to love, but you also have to love to receive. Meaning if you don't love the person that you're learning from, then you can't really receive anything from them. I mean, you might be able to get some information, but that's not really called receiving. Because we said that receiving, the point of love is to transfer energy and sustenance in a way that it makes you grow. So knowledge is not exactly growth. And love is the matter of growth. Okay, the same thing is between a husband and wife. That in this case, the giver is the husband, so it's the chesed, the loving kindness on the right side is what the husband gives his wife, what he loves his wife, and the woman has to want to receive. So even if one of the most painful types of love is love that's not received, right? That one side very much wants to give, or sometimes it's just as painful when the other side wants to receive and it doesn't come, right? So both sides require love for the relationship of the giver and the receiver. And the same thing is true of parents and children, that the one who's giving is the parent, so he's on the right side, that's the victory, netzach. But the child also has a form of love for his parents. And because of that love, he's able to receive. So that's the acknowledgement. So Shuli Kleiman, who watches this class from America, she's in America, I think. I don't know, but she's not in. I don't think she's in Israel. So I'm supposed to do something for a project that they have going of what I guess 40 days of 100 thank yous every day to Hashem, and I've been very negligent. And then finally last week I said, I'll do it. And then I kept looking for this tripod so I could put my camera in front of me and so I could do it. And I couldn't find it until today. So it's b'sher. But so I'll say it now, and then hopefully. This is related to kimu v'kiblu ha'yehudim alehem. That in the Megillah we read that it was like a second, or it was the finalization of receiving the Torah. When Hashem gave us the Torah, so again, He was the giver, we were the receiver. But all that happened, and this is what it sounded, that's what the Chazal say, that He forced it upon us. Kafalem hal kegigit. That He forced the Torah on us, saying, either you accept the Torah, or this is where you die. And why is that so difficult? Because what are we basically hearing? That there's only one side to this whole relationship. That Hashem wants to give us, but we don't love Him back enough to receive it. And that was missing. But how could that be? Because when we left Egypt, we went to receive the Torah. We said Nasa v'nishma. So how can you say that we didn't want to? That we didn't want to receive it? We wanted to receive it. So we're left with this huge conundrum of how can you say that He had to force it on us? He didn't force it. We wanted it. But then the sages say that really we received it only in the time of Esther. And then suddenly something's different. And they read somehow in the verse, Kimu v'kiblu ha'Yehudim, Kimu ma shekvar kiblu. That they didn't receive, but rather they upheld, l'kayem, what they already had received. How did they get to this? How did Chazal get to this? So that's going to be our topic really today. Okay? Wait. To understand why we became the receivers of the Torah only after the miracle of Purim. There was something in this miracle that finalized our ability to receive the Torah. So we're going to talk all day long about, all day, hour and a half, whatever it is, about the relationship between the giver and the receiver in terms of love.
It's because a woman had to be involved.
It's also very interesting. There are also women in other places, like Miriam was there also. She was a prophetess. But so I think I like the idea. We just have to develop it.
If we said we're going to receive it and then learn it, or whatever, in the beginning, I lost the jump.
So we have to say that
when you said
there was no love yet.
Right, and then you were...
There was something missing. So we'll say the missing ingredient was love, but we have to explain it.
And then what was the part about we upheld it?
So the verse in the Megillah says, Kimu v'kiblu ha'Yehudim aleim. So it says, why do they both upheld? Why did they both uphold and receive? So the sages say it's not that they upheld and received the Megillah, rather they upheld. They received what they had already upheld, but they hadn't yet received. What are we talking about? The Torah, the entire Torah, not just Esther, not just the Megillah of Esther.
Right.
Okay?
What was the famous mimer of the Frierdiker Rebbe? Historic moment.
Right. Okay, so that's basically going to be how we're right. That's going to be the direction. What is the secret? That they were called Yehudim. Right? And Yehudim here is like Hod. It's like the acknowledgement here. That to really receive, you have to be a Yehudi. You have to be a person who has Hod. And Hod means to say thank you. That's why we call this sometimes either acknowledgement or thanksgiving. But a Jew is called a Jew, Yehudi, because he either acknowledges God, or, even more importantly, he gives thanks to God. And in Torah Or, in the end there's Maimarim from the Alter Rebbe and the Megillah. And there's a short mimer on these two words, Kimu v'kiblu ha'Yehudim aleim. And there he writes that giving thanks is greater than saying a bracha. The giving thanks, saying thank you to Hashem, is greater than saying a bracha. Why? So the short answer is, he gives there, because when you say a bracha, you're bringing something down. So necessarily it has to contract. It has to, when you bring something down, it can't, Hashem's infinite nature can't come down as is, so it has to be limited. But when you give thanks, you're not planning on bringing anything down, so you just connect to the infinite. Every time you say thank you to Hashem, bracha means to bring down, le'avrich. It's like what you do with a branch, that you pull it down to the ground and you create like a knee, and you cover the knee with earth, and then a new sapling comes out. That's called le'avrich. So you're pulling something down. And bracha itself comes from a breicha, like from a pool. So you're drawing down water from that pool. But when you say thanks to Hashem, when you give thanks to Hashem, Yehudi, who gives thanks, so you're addressing the essence itself without any a purpose or any intent of bringing it down. So it's not limited. The thanks reaches the highest place that it could possibly be reached, the very essence of Hashem. Okay? So when a person says 100 brachas every day, so that's very good. He brought down 100 times some shefa. But when you say thank you 100 times a day, so you've touched the very essence of Hashem 100 times. It's a much higher level than doing something in order to bring something down. Okay, so let's see how this works. Okay, so we'll read from here a little, just so that I can decide if this needs to be edited or not. Okay. Let's see. One of the primary realities, I'm reading from section 3. One of the primary realities relevant to a giver, right, the person who's giving, the right side here, is that when he has more to offer than the recipient can receive, he must be capable and willing to restrict and carefully channel to the receiver that which he can readily accept on his level. So there has to be some kind of limiting of what I'm giving. It's a principle, in fact, that whenever somebody gives, he's mimicking Hashem, and actually he has an infinite amount to give. By definition, when you give, it's as if you become infinite. What's the remez? Anybody know? Anybody heard this remez? That what's the root of to give in Hebrew? How do you say to give? But the root, the 3-letter root. Natan. Nun taf nun. I hope that's the root. And if that's the root, then it's equal to pulvu. It's equal to be fruitful and multiply. 500, they're both equal 500. The power to, what? Okay. Natan is 500, and pulvu is 500. And in Chassidus, especially in Derech Mitzvotecha, it's explained that the power to procreate is the infinite power, because it's the power that's most similar to being like Hashem. That's why that was the first mitzvah that Adam Rishon received. Pulvu milut ha'aretz v'chibshua. Be fruitful and multiply. So whenever I give, every giving is a manifestation of my infinite capacity, my infinite
like a seed
ability. Right. So the ultimate form of giving is really when it creates a human being. But we said that every form of giving is really to go from ayin to yesh, from nothingness to something. And it's the same thing as God creating the world, right? We talked about this a lot. That every form, every act of love, of giving, is an infinite act. It comes to create a new reality in the world. Okay. So it's not just that when he has more to offer. It's almost a given that when a person wants to give, he's exercising his infinite faculty, his infinite capacity. And it comes out specifically when you give. That's why it says that a very Jewish trait is to enjoy giving. Why do I enjoy it? Because at that moment Hashem is in me. Because that's being the most similar to Hashem that I can.
That's nice to know.
So one of the primary realities, A knowledgeable teacher cannot expect the student to be able to immediately grasp the breadth of knowledge behind his or her words. So here we're not talking about facts. Maybe knowledge is not the right word, but when I teach Torah, I'm teaching something that is infinite, and after how I grasp it, how the teacher grasps it, is not how the student can receive it at first. I have to limit it. Right? I can't transfer the way it is inside to somebody else. Therefore, teachers must find strategies to restrict and craft their lessons such that they can be absorbed by their students, despite their more limited knowledge and experience, right, the students. All parents go through a stage of talking baby talk to their young children, communicating to them on their levels. By the way, same thing, baby talk is very nice. The same thing when you're being mechanech somebody. Nobody thinks that a person wants to be mechanech somebody because he wants to control him. You're mechanech because you want the person to have a good life. You know that if he doesn't know how to control himself, if he doesn't know how to act, so he's not going to have a good life. So certainly every parent or every educator comes from the point of view that I want the students or my child's best. It's not about control. At least at the root of it, it's not about that. Except that you know that this is the worst thing for them to do now. So you start berating them. And you do it with all the strength that you have. Why? Because you're looking only at your giving. And it can come out even as anger. It can come out as disciplining them. But it can't be received that way. It takes time to understand a lesson like that. Like you can't stay out after, I don't know what. If it's a girl, let's say. You can't stay out after 2 in the afternoon. If it's a girl. You can't stay out. Why? What's the problem? All my friends do So, and you begin to explain. So you have to take into consideration the limitation of the child to understand what you're saying. It's not that they're stubborn. They can't understand what you're saying yet. Because it's life experience. It's not something that like, right, the famous Mark Twain Meforish, as we say, that when he was 19, he left his home and he traveled to Europe, and then when he came back when he was 27, he said, "When I left my father 8 years ago, he was the stupidest man alive. I can't believe how much he learned in 8 years." Okay. So he didn't learn anything, but he had some experiences. So suddenly, wait a minute, not everything he's saying is so stupid. So that has to be the consideration. Now there's 2 types of receiving pleasure from giving. Inherent in all states of giving is the experience of pleasure. Whenever you give, that's pleasure. And that's going to be a big deal as we go on. But that giving, we said here because you're the most similar to Hashem. It's the power of the Ein Sof inside you. But we'll see that it's even more than that as we go on. Which can manifest itself, it can appear in 2 ways, this experience of pleasure. And it depends on the intent of the giver. There's 2 different types of giving, basically. There's the first type of giver, he gets pleasure simply from the essence of giving. The act itself of giving is what gives him the pleasure. This person's nature is to give, and therefore that is his pleasure, independent of the reaction or the ability of the receiver to receive what he's giving him. Every act of giving comes together with pleasure. That's how it is. The second type of giver also loves to give, but he holds back the experience of pleasure until sure of the success of his giving, until he's certain that what he's giving has been received properly on the other side. Yes, he conditions his giving. but not on the other side receiving it. He just says, I won't receive the pleasure. It doesn't condition the giving. The giving he gives anyway. But he's not willing to take the pleasure unless the process of giving is completed. That's fine. Thank you. Okay? It's a very deep thing. Whenever you give, you immediately have pleasure. The question is whether you're willing to postpone the pleasure until the other side receives what you gave them. Until you see it. You see that they have pleasure. When you see that they're receiving pleasure from what you gave them, then you take their pleasure. That's called holding yourself. It's a tremendous feat. It's not easy at all, because right away when you start giving, you get pleasure. So how do you hold back? How do you wait until the student, you see that they understood fully what you have to say? So you can think of 100 examples of where this is true. But anything that's premature in this area is because you don't know how to hold back, because you're not waiting to see that the other side has received what it needs to receive.
What about people who don't like to give? They want to keep everything for themselves.
They're missing out on the biggest pleasure there is. Sometimes what happens is that people give to themselves. It's not exactly that they don't give. They give to themselves. So, and the Arizal writes, so when a person gives to himself, there's the added benefit that he knows exactly what he needs. He or she knows exactly what they need. So only I know how to give to myself the right way. Nobody else in the world could ever give me the way I can give myself. But he says that's like being not human. Because a human, by definition, was created too. Why does Hashem created them too? Why does Hashem, in general, put us in a world where there are other people? So that we understand that we need somebody else, even when it comes to something that if we would do it ourselves, it would come out better. And even when there's something like giving, which when I give to myself is much better than if I give to somebody else. I will receive more pleasure because I'm both the giver and the receiver. And still, Hashem created us two, male and female, so that we know that that type of pleasure doesn't last. It doesn't make an impression in the world. It's just feeding myself. And that's not how Hashem created the world. So it's like it's being oisveld. It's like leaving the world. It's not really being inside the world. If you want to take part in the world, you have to have a partner. You have to have somebody else. There can be many partners. There can be many people that you're giving to, or receiving from. Especially the pleasure. Don't give to yourself. Rather, wait for it to come from somebody else. Somebody else. That's called also a type of waiting, of being able to hold myself, not to take pleasure from myself. The pleasure from myself, I'll wait. If somebody wants to give it to me, they go wait.
What if somebody receives as if it was a humiliation?
Meaning it's being given like it's humiliating.
No.
They don't know how to receive.
They don't know how to receive, even though they're in severe need.
Right. So that's what we began with, that you can only receive really from somebody that you love. Okay? It means that the relationship is not built properly. There's people who can't build relationships. It's true. And so they'll never be able to receive. It's one of the reasons for me to be able to build loving relationships with others is because basically that's where most people put family. Where do I have my basic form of loving relationships? Inside my family. That you carry it your whole life, that you have a supportive family where you feel that your relationships are full of love. But the truth is that that's not the highest form. That's what we call the habitual. That's the most instinctual form of love. Above that, there's the love between a husband and wife, and above that even, is the love between the Rav and the students. It's higher. And so to build a loving relationship. What?
It doesn't come natural?
It's not natural at all. It's very intellectual. But when that appears in a person's life, it's more satisfying, actually, than the habitual.
People give out of duty. They have to give.
It could be that it's duty. It could be that they really love each other. But there's always duty involved. Okay? They really love each other, but there's always this added dimension of it being habitual or dutiful. Okay. So these are the two types, and the giver has to decide which type he wants to be. Do I want to be the one who takes pleasure from the act of giving, or do I postpone my pleasure until what I'm giving is received properly by the person receiving it? So if I'm teaching in a class, or I'm teaching my son or whoever it is, so I have to postpone my taking pleasure, and I'm still in the process of still giving. And it could be that this process is years long. It could be that it's not talking about like a few minutes. It could be that for years I postpone taking pleasure until I see that this has been received properly. Okay?
A lot of
Yes. Yeah.
A lot of parents.
It's not just gvura. We'll see. It's called kavamida. It's called the measuring rod. Like to be able to measure, to limit how much I'm giving at every moment, right, within love.
But then there's a lot of parents who feel like no matter what they do, it's never received. It's never good enough. The kids never fall back.
I pressed something. So that was it. I did the right thing. What?
Right?
There's
Sorry.
a lot of parents who just continue to feel the kids never get it because they never see them act the way they would act.
Okay. So if you want to receive the pleasure, and you're tired of waiting for them to get it,
But no, I mean even if
so
they get it.
so you finish it just by giving it. Okay, I've done what I can. That's it. But if I'm willing to postpone my gratification until that time when they do get it,
That'd be wonderful.
then there's more chance that they will get it.
Right.
Otherwise, we hear it sort of like, okay, you spilled your guts, or you spilled what you wanted to spill, and that's it. That's when in fact, usually, it's one of the sorry things about this is that when a person receives the gratification just from the act of giving, what they enjoy more is the overflowing, meaning that it's not received properly. It almost goes together. They're like, I want to see it actually like spill out. I don't want to enjoy the ability to receive. I enjoy the fact. It's like, think about it. It's like a person who has a tremendous amount of knowledge to give, and they have no soda tzimtzum, it's called. They have no ability to contract what they want to give, so that they start bombarding you with words and more, and you see that the more they speak, the more the higher they go. But you're not getting anything. But they enjoy that fact that you don't get it. They look at you and say, "Oh, you're bewildered. Let me go further." There is such a thing. I mean, I've been in shiur like that, where I couldn't understand half a word. But that was actually the high. Like, I understand and you don't. It's almost like, let's see it spill out so that you can, when I see you completely, like, can't stand anymore, then I've done what I wanted to do. Okay.
And this Kav Hamidah, that's what Shammai was hitting the air with?
It's Amata Binyan. Kav Hamidah is a mimer in the Zohar. So Ma'amar Kav Hamidah. But we'll explain it in Hasidic terms in a moment. So, okay. The second type of giver also loves to give, but holds back the experience of pleasure until sure of the success of his giving. This type of giving, in which one subjugates his own feelings or motives, is the more pure expression of love, since giving motivated by selfish pleasure of doing or giving can often be merely an exercise in loving oneself in the guise of loving another. And so that's basically what we see. So in ancient days, what's the extreme form of giving without any intent of waiting for the other side to receive? So that's when a man gets married to a woman. And here he says that in the time of the temple, they used to ask a chassan under the chuppah. We don't do this anymore because we're either we think that they won't understand the question or we're afraid of the answer. It's not clear. But they used to ask them in Eretz Yisrael, matzah u'motzeh. What do you find? Okay? Or have you found? Motzeh ani mar mimavet et ha'isha. I find a woman to be more bitter than death, says Shlomo Melech. It's one statement he says. And another statement he says, Matzah isha, matzah tov, ve'afek ratzon me'avaya. Matzah isha, a person who has found a wife, has found good. And he brings down will, he produces will from Hashem. So they used to ask him, matzah or motzeh, which is it? Do you find the woman to be more bitter than death, or do you find her to be good? What's the difference? The difference is, what are you looking for? If you're looking for a spouse because what you want is to gratify yourself, Motzeh ani, I find, right, you learned this at some point. Motzeh ani, I find myself, I find my I, my ani. Then it's mal mimavet. Then it's more bitter than death. If what you're looking for is your self-gratification, then marriage will be more bitter than death for you. But if it's matzah isha, but if what I'm searching for is the other for whom or to whom to give, that I want to give to someone else, because giving is the ultimate form of fulfillment. It's the ultimate form of being one or being similar to Hashem. It's the power of the infinite in me. And I want to exercise it. Why do I want children? Because I want gratification, or because I want to give to someone? So if I'm searching for the other, and it's the other that interests me, and I'm willing, and because of that, to postpone my gratification until the other receives properly, then it brings down goodwill from Hashem. Hashem helps me with this. The more a person tries to hold back until that moment when he sees that the person he's giving to has received correctly, the more Hashem gives him strength to hold back. The more you want to be able to do it, the more Hashem gives you strength. Now the truth is that there is infinitely more pleasure in holding back than there is in trying to just take pleasure in the act of giving. So, for instance, a father wants to teach his son Torah, or he wants to give him money. So you can sit him down and say, okay, we're going to start now, and let's see how far we can get. After 20 minutes, his son is like, and he keeps going. And he's so, he's in a lot. He loves it. It's full of light. So great to sit down with my son. Look, I'm teaching him. And he doesn't look at all to see whether his son is even a vessel to receive anything. So in the end, when you give that way, so it causes you, it does cause you some pain at the end. It's not so good. The same thing with money. If you give, you want to give him $1 million, and you give it right away, all at once, you can't receive. He doesn't know what to do with that. So then you will ultimately meet heartache, even though you gave so much. There's such a feeling of goodness in this act of giving, but in the end, it's better, even what the Rambam writes, that if you're going to give 1,000 shekels, break it up into 10 times 100. Don't give 1,000 at once. Why? Because you do receive more pleasure when you break it up. First of all, you're giving 10 times, not once. So it's true that the initial rush with 1,000 is bigger, but when it can be received, when you give it according to the needs, it's much better than if you give it just to satisfy your need to give. Okay? Give according to needs. Don't give to satisfy your needs. Your needs. Okay. So I need the this thing.
All of a sudden, or do you need
No, I need it in. I have 20% left. Oh, because I probably didn't connect to the Wi-Fi. That's why. I don't know. Thank you.
Can I ask about that?
Sure.
Breaking up, if you go into, say instead of giving 1,000 shekels at once, you're going to break it up 10 times. Does that set up an anticipation on the part of the receiver?
Could
then?
also, yes, could be. Could be that it also creates more of a vessel. It's a vessel that repeats many times. Could be.
Okay.
Could be.
And that's okay.
It's a better thing. It connects you in a stronger way because now there's also, like you said, anticipation. I'm anticipating the next time. I'm looking forward to the next time. It's like I'm preparing myself for the next time that I receive. Okay, so that's the next paragraph, which we'll skip. The identical principle applies to the act of giving. If the pleasure is in the giving, and I'm not really concerned with how you receive it, then in essence I am giving for my own sake. Like we said, I'm giving to satisfy my needs. On the other hand, if I can postpone the urge to experience the pleasure of giving until I am sure that you have truly received pleasure from my giving, then what has been fulfilled is the true essence of giving. Among the most significant applications of this principle is the approach and attitude of husband and wife during the marital relations. So that's clear. It was obvious all along, so we won't get into it. But here what we're really interested in is between a teacher and a student, because that's the highest form of this type of love that's giving and receiving. Okay? The desire to be sensitive to the needs of others and to make others happy is the purpose and focus of giving. This concept is expressed in the phrase, the end of a deed exists in the first thought. Meaning, sof ma'aseh b'machshavat tchila, that the purpose of what I'm doing depends on my initial intent. Okay, so all this is very nice. Now, how do you do this? How do you become sensitive? And more importantly, not just sensitive. It's not just enough to be sensitive, because you have to hold yourself back. Like, again, if you're a teacher who's teaching something, or if you're a therapist who's working with somebody, it's the same thing. You have to hold back on saying, I really helped them, until you see that they really have been helped. You can really fly with your insights. You can really take off. Wow, I really understood this person. I really understand what they need. And you're already out there. You're flying high. but the other person didn't. But the person who came to you doesn't understand at all what you understand.
It's not enough if they say thank you.
And it's not enough that they say thank you. You have to really be sensitive to see that it really hit home, that it really they received it in the proper way, that they can integrate it into themselves. So you have to go through a process to be able to hold back.
I think also when you try to make a clarification, hold back. I think the ultimate of the love in this context is helping them come to their own conclusion as well, in a way.
Yeah.
That is being cultivated by either therapeutic context, or not.
So now we'll say it a little bit differently. I don't think it's wrong what you did. I think it's okay, but let's say it even better, that I want them to be able to say what I think is right, but without me telling them.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Okay?
That's the hardest.
That's it. I see, like again with my children, I see it clearly. I see exactly what the problem is. They could just see it the way that I see it, but they can't because they're in a different place. When will they be able to see it? If I can give it over in such a way that it can be received. If I can find how to limit, contract. So normally when you think about these things, what do you think? Okay, so I have to explain it really slowly. But the whole point here is that to be able to explain it properly is not dependent on how good a pedagogue you are. It's not about how good an instructor you are. It's about something entirely different. It's whether you can go through contraction. Whether you can go through what Hashem went through when He created the world. Tzimtzum.
How do
You have to do tzimtzum yourself.
How do you?
Okay?
Do you know?
So let's see. You're right.
But
That hachna'ah is the first stage here. That's like the
never
tzimtzum.
called that tzimtzum.
So he means something else when he says tzimtzum. I don't want to get into it. You can read his book. Actually, I don't know if these books he wrote in English. He probably did, because he writes in English and then they're translated into Hebrew.
Was he a student of the Rav?
No. He has his own world.
Sorry.
No, this is better. This is steady.
Don't worry, I like it here.
Okay. So let's see. We'll skip the next paragraph and go to 4. According to Kabbalah, before the primordial tzimtzum, the contraction, the spiritual light of creation was in a state of infinity.
Chaos.
No,
Oh, that's not.
I'll explain in a moment. Okay? Whereas the phenomena of vessels or finiteness was totally hidden. Okay, so it's written here a little strange. But let's explain. And there are two. You have to say about Hashem that He's everything. You can't say that He's missing something, because the moment you say He's missing something, that's not Hashem. That's a part of Hashem. So, one way of saying He has everything is to say He's both finite and infinite. Okay? He's both limited and unlimited. When Hashem wanted to create the worlds, according to Kabbalah, according to the result, this was his big chiddush. So he contracted himself. That's what he writes. So without getting into what the Kabbalistic normal understanding was, when the Baal Shem Tov came, he explained that the meaning here is a reversal, really, a mirror image, or an inverse image. It says a contraction doesn't mean that anything was hidden or lost. Sorry, hidden's not the right, but it doesn't mean it didn't become less. It just became the inverse of what was there until now. So, if before He created the worlds, what was revealed was His infinite nature, His unlimited nature, Hashem's unlimited nature, to create the worlds, he revealed his limited nature. Because worlds means a place that is limited. That's the definition of what a world is. But that's only half the picture. Before he created the worlds, what was revealed was his infinite nature, and he also had a limited nature. It was just concealed. And when he created the world, he did the reverse of that. So he revealed his limited nature, and he concealed his infinite nature. Okay? Why is it called tzimtzum then? It should be called reversal, nafochu. Right? So first of all, who said? Maybe it's also called nafochu. Okay? Maybe on Purim, that's the time that you understand the tzimtzum the best. That really, tzimtzum means nafochu. It's the opposite. Right? There's a famous gematria, famous because it was taught in Purim a few times, and it's actually a well-known one, that in the Gemara, how do you say it's the opposite of what you just told me? You say, ipcha mistabra. It's exactly the opposite. Ipcha mistabra. The exact opposite is what makes sense, not what you just told me. Ipcha mistabra equals Baal Tshuva. A Baal Tshuva is actually a person who didn't go through a transformation. He just switched what was revealed and what was hidden. You don't lose anything. You're not supposed to lose something. You're just supposed to say, there are parts of me that until now have been revealed. Those have to be hidden. And the parts of me that were hidden now will be revealed. Really, to be a Baal Tshuva is just to do a nafochu. That's the real meaning of it. And that's how Hashem creates a new world. He does a nafochu. That's why Hasidim like to do kulas. Kulas means that you flip over. Okay? You have to see the world upside down once in a while. You have to be able to say it's exactly the opposite. Exactly the opposite from what I thought. If you can say it's exactly the opposite, then you experience something of what it means to create a world.
So it's tafcha when you flip it over?
Itapcha, yeah, sort of. Yeah, itapech. Cool.
It's making it, whenever he says, flip it. This gives a little bit of backbone to it.
And what about the big fight between whether tzimtzum was Peshuta and Lo Peshuta?
So until then it was Kipshuto, and now Hashem, he reversed it. So he says now it's Lo Kipshuto. That before then there were all kinds of voices that said it's Kipshuto, you can't appear in this world. And he said, on the contrary, I will appear in this world. So he reversed it. He did it Lo Kipshuto. Okay. Anyway, so let's get back to me. When I want to give, so I am unlimited. We said it, the giving is the power of the unlimited. I connect to the power of the unlimited, the Natan, the Pourvu, the power of the infinite. That's what I feel. That I feel this urge to be infinite. And when you feel the urge to be infinite, you want to spread out. You want to fill the entire world. So what do I have to do? Reveal exactly the opposite. I have to do a tzimtzum in myself. And reveal my limited nature. If until the giving for me was a process of breaking the barrier between me and you, it becomes the process of building a barrier so that I don't overflow. It's like limiting myself, revealing my limited nature instead of my infinite nature. That's what Hashem did. In order to create the world, until then he had been revealing his infinite nature. He filled everything. That's how the Arizal describes it. Now suddenly he contracted. It means that everything was by measure. So that's now this by measure is where this word kavamidah begins to come in. It's a very important, the measuring rod, the measuring stick.
Stars. It's stars, when they're in the sky,
Good.
unlimited. But when they do the job to shine on the world, so they are limited. And the same Am Yisrael, that Hashem said to Abraham, look at the stars, you can't count them.
Good.
But you can count Am Yisrael, but you... I don't know.
Okay. Fine. As long as it's as long as it's being fruitful, multiplying in your head. That means it's being received. So what was I going to say? It's okay. It's okay.
Talking about Midah.
Thank you. So now to understand what does it mean to measure. So there's an incredible Gemara that describes that Rabbi Akiva once went to Rome, and when he saw Rome, he said, "Im kach leovrei retzono, al achat kama v'chama leosei retzono." Meaning, literally, the way it would be translated on the internet, if this is the pleasure that he gives to those who transgress his will, how all the more so to those who do his will. Okay? So it's usually understood that this is talking about the world to come, meaning that in this world, those who transgress Hashem's will, they have all the fun.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they have all the fun. And we'll have all the fun in the world to come. We'll laugh last. We'll be the last ones laughing. Though, apart from the fact that I don't really care so much about the world to come, because it doesn't help me right now. In Chassidus, this statement is explained so beautifully in a way that's related to this. It says, what does it mean, Ovrei Ritzono? How is the keter? Remember, there's emunah, ta'anug, ratzon, and then the intellect. So, la'avor et retzono means to skip over his will. So what are they doing? They're going directly from pleasure into reality. That's like pleasure spilling into reality. That's an over retzono. Transgressing can also mean skipping, la'avor el retzono. It's just to skip over the will. What does the will do to the pleasure? It limits it. Say it one way. You want to, usually there it's talking as if they're receiving the pleasure, but it doesn't matter. It's the same thing when you're giving the pleasure. It's the same thing exactly. If I skip over the will, what I'm doing is I'm just giving pleasure without any limits. When I take Hashem's will into consideration, or I take the person who's receiving the pleasure, who's receiving from me, I take their will into consideration, I have to limit how I'm giving.
If the will's working properly, it's limiting, but if
Right.
it's run,
If
it's
I'm
not.
skipping over it,
Is that what it means? If you're skipping over it, you mean
so
just
really
letting it go?
what the Romans are missing, they don't understand Hashem's will.
Right.
They understand the pleasure perfectly. They know how to take pleasure from this world. They know maybe better than me even. But what they're missing is the will. What does the will do? It contracts, it limits
Is that our free will or is that Hashem's will?
Hashem's will.
Right.
Or, in this case, it's the person who's receiving from me, his will. Okay? How much do you want? Well, we said we're going to be talking in the end about Am Yisrael receiving the Torah. How much do you really want it? Or how much do you love me so that you can really receive it?
It's hard to love somebody.
See?
You have to talk about it till you feel it in your bones.
See, understand this? If I'm giving without reservation, without taking into any consideration who's receiving from me, that's called skipping over the will. And seemingly you receive a tremendous amount of pleasure from this. because there's such an amount. It's like an Ensof. It's like this infinite. It's this power of the infinite in you. But he says, why did Hashem create the world? Because there's infinitely, in the end, more pleasure when you limit yourself, not when you go directly to give everything all at once. In the end, there's infinitely more pleasure if I take into consideration the one who's receiving. It may seem that it's not, but that's what Rabbi Akiva says. If this is the pleasure received, the fun that those who ignore Hashem's will receive in this world, all the more so those who do His will, meaning that they give pleasure that is dependent on what Hashem allows and doesn't allow. They limit their pleasure. How do they limit it?
Hashem limits.
Hashem told me what to do, what to take pleasure from, what not to. So I say it in a simple way. The Romans, they love pork, and it's delicious, and they love it, and it's great, and it's more fun than not to eat it. We know this. That's how it is. Everybody knows this, right? That's why the Christians eat pork, because it's delicious. Why don't I eat it? Because Hashem said, my will is not to. So on the face of it, I would think that by contracting my pleasure, not receiving pleasure from something, really I'm only suspending it until Hashem says it's okay. But I'm suspending it until the world is ready for this. So it's really just what we call what is it when you suspend gratification? We learned this once from Wikipedia. I don't remember what it was called. Something like that. Like that experiment that you can take one cookie now or 5 cookies later. What was it? Something. Suspending gratification.
They did much better in life.
Delayed.
The people the children that waited around and eating the marshmallows.
Because you get more pleasure in the end. So it's true that it looks like those who skip over the will, they receive a lot more now. But those who contract, taking the pleasure, they wait. In the end, they receive much more. That those who act through will, and will is described as kava midah in the Zohar. It's called the measuring rod, because will says all the time, is this ratzui, or another way of saying will in Hebrew is ratzui. Is this good or not good? Is this acceptable or not acceptable? And that's what will says. So that's exactly this thing, that if I can give, but suspend my gratification, not receive the pleasure right away from the act of giving, but wait until the one I'm giving to has received properly, then the pleasure I receive at the end is much, much greater than the pleasure I receive, because my will is now involved. My will limits my pleasure. And it becomes pleasure also on both sides, whereas here it's just one side is pleasure. So all this is dependent on how much I love the other person. If I don't love the one that I'm giving to, we said love is the power of something from nothing. So what am I doing? I'm becoming nothingness. Normally I'm all something. I just want to give and give and give. And using love, I'm able to contract myself and to reveal my limited nature. I'm not going to give as much as I can. I'm going to hold back until the vessels are created on the other side, so that my student, my client, whoever it is, can receive what needs to be received. So it's not about it's not about what I'm going to say. It's rather how much I can nullify myself. I can flip myself, instead of being infinite, to be finite, to hold back. That's nullification.
How come so many people who are in this step end up divorced?
Which one?
Because they can't.
Holding back.
What do you mean holding back?
Well, holding back and waiting and not giving and giving.
Are you sure that they want to give? Maybe they're not holding back. Maybe they're not giving it all.
Maybe they're not giving.
Ken, here we're talking about somebody who very much, again, like a father and a young child. So here you brought the example of baby talk, but it could be like teaching a child how to walk. And so I know how to walk. It's the easiest thing. It's let's go for a walk. But the child can only take baby steps. So okay, so I'll work with you at your level. I have so much more to give you. So, hold it back. Same thing with sweets. Of course, I want you to enjoy yourself. But I know that if I give this to you now, then I'll have the pleasure of having given you right away, but you don't have the pleasure of really receiving what you needed to receive. And so
we end up suffering.
So really, my being able to delay my gratification from giving is only relevant if I really want to give. If I don't really want to give, so I'm just using it as an excuse. I'm just saying that, well, I'm not going to give you because you're not ready for it. So one of the things about giving things in their right time, in their proper order, and so on, is that it doesn't need to be said. It's a barrier I place on myself. It's not you're not the issue. I'm the issue. So I don't have to share with you the fact that I'm now limiting myself. It's none of your concern. I'm gauging all the time whether you can receive more or not. Whether you can receive what I'm ready to give you or not ready to receive it. And if you're not, I limit myself. That's my issue. The person who says I'm holding back, so I don't believe they're really holding back.
Is it the same thing as first and second nature? When we say first nature is the spontaneous,
Right.
like what I want to do, but it's,
Right.
it's much more
Right, because the second nature is already involved with will. There's tikkun in it. Kava midah means that things are gradated. I think that's the right way to say it. But they have an order to them. A line in general is the opposite of everything coming all together. There are levels. There are stages. There are amounts that each person can receive at any given time. So there's these stages that you're going through.
I can't keep this thought in my head. If you can't love the one you're with, if you can't have the one you love the one you're with. This is what it reminds me of.
Could be. Okay, let's go back to Purim. The same thing has to happen for the one who's receiving. He also has to love the one who's giving him. But there's exactly the reverse picture. What does the person who's receiving want? Based on their needs. Right? So what do I need from you? Well, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. You don't give me this, you haven't given me anything. So the picture in the one who's receiving is completely the opposite. What I want is very well defined. I know exactly what I want.
We don't know what's good for us.
So for me to flip as a receiver means I have to be open to receiving something that I can't even picture in myself right now. My duty is the opposite. Otherwise, I will never receive anything from you, because you can never, I said this in the beginning, you can never give me exactly what I think I need. Nobody in the world can. There's not a living soul alive that can give me exactly what I think I need. Because what do you say? What am I saying? I'm saying that somehow they have to read my mind. They have to be me, basically. That's not going to happen. Even if I explain what I want, nobody can still understand it. It's not enough. It'll never be exactly what I'm picturing. So what I'm picturing is a completely limited reality. So what is revealed in the receiver to begin with? A limited reality. He has this picture of what he wants. What's his duty? To reverse it is what was revealed in the receiver to begin with. He has to flip the picture over and reveal the unlimited.
Why do you call it limited if he has a clear picture?
A clear picture is a very limited picture of what I want. It's very defined. It's exact.
The receiver has it
Yeah,
within.
to begin with. But now if somebody is now teaching me, and this is not exactly what I wanted to hear, to open my mind means that I'm willing to hear an answer to a different question than the one that I had.
What?
To hear an answer to a question that I didn't think I had.
And what makes him do that? Loving the giver?
Again, that I love him or her. Yeah.
It's receiver loving the giver. That
opens
the...
That does the opposite of the contraction. The contraction is a v'nafochu. It's just to flip it over. So instead of receiving what I thought I should receive, I'm receiving something much greater, which challenges me because this is not what I thought I should receive. And now I'm open to it. I become open to it, and I can really receive it. And I can receive pleasure. I suddenly realize, wait a minute, I was given everything I need. One of these, the biggest place that this has to happen is with reference to our childhood. And that everybody thinks, or most everybody thinks, that they weren't given what they needed in order to grow up. Right, to grow up well. And the v'nafochu there is that I have to understand that that picture is because I'm limiting what I think I need to receive. But in truth, if I turn it over, and now I reveal my unlimited nature, then I can begin to see that I received everything that I needed. There was nothing lacking. Everything that I received was exactly what I needed. But I can only do that if I let go of my limited picture of who I am. So, even if a parent of mine told me, rejected me, I needed that rejection. Because I don't understand that. How could you need rejection? No, I needed that. Why? So, begin to think. Be open-minded. Think about what could be good about that.
Maybe a child who has grew up with an absent parent and held on to it, but because of that, they grew, it opened up so many possibilities and brought them to a much bigger place in life.
So sometimes it's to make me more sensitive to other people, like in the story with the Baal Shem Tov, that he lost his parents and he's got this big gaping hole, and he can only understand people because of that hole. He only sees their needs because he has that hole in himself. It's made him sensitive. And sometimes it's something else entirely. Maybe it's because, for me, really it didn't do as much damage as I think it did. But it made me sensitive to never do that to somebody else. And with my children, this became a really critical issue, that no matter what, I would never reject them. Because let's say, God forbid, my child ends up in jail for doing something terrible. But I remember the worst thing in the world is to be rejected, even though for me it wasn't such a big deal. But it's the worst thing in the world. That's what I received. I received rejection. So now I take that and I say, but that's the worst thing in the world. So no matter what they do, I won't reject them.
But even when, certainly we take away something that's meaningful to us, we can never really know the reason. So it's almost like if we could decide, we could really take away something, but even more limiting, we're continuing to limit the bracha.
And then you can still open it up again, do another contraction, reverse contraction, and maybe it's much more than what I've said. But right now, this is
self in the end.
Right.
It'll take you to the
end. I really did receive everything that I could possibly need. It's just that my picture of what I needed was very limited. So then I have to reverse. As a receiver, if I really love who gave me, again, I go through the same nafochu that makes it possible for me to see the infinite that was given to me. Otherwise, I can't see it. And you need love for this. You need to. That's what it really means to love your parents. That here were these two people, whoever they were. Sometimes a person doesn't even know who they were, but they gave me everything. Even by not giving me, they gave me everything that I needed. But for that, I need to love, because the love, what it does here is it reveals, it reverses from the finite to the infinite, from the infinite to the finite. So, with relation to the Torah, so what did you tell us, Hashem, when you gave us the Torah? What did we think the Torah was? We thought, Torah is a good thing. And most importantly, it doesn't really matter what we thought it was, but it was A, B, C, D, E, F, G. It was these things. It's not those things. It's this and not that.
Like what? What's the difference?
One guy thinks it's a rule book. The other guy thinks it's I don't know, whatever. It's a dikduk book, and whatever he thought it was. Yeah, history book. You had a conception in the same way that it was very clear until Esther who Hashem was. Who's Hashem? Well, we know. 30 years before Megillat Esther, there was still the temple in Yerushalayim. He lives here. This is where he lives. This is his address. This is what he does. This is what he looks like. That he could be a Achashverosh? That Hashem could be a Achashverosh? What are you talking about? That doesn't make any sense. This lowlife, this guy who all he does is have beauty pageants? Sounds like somebody we know today.
No.
Runs beauty pageants. This can be the revelation of Hashem in the world. How could that be? It doesn't make any sense. And yet, v'nafochu. Let go of your limitations. Stop telling Hashem what to be like. Don't put limits on who He is. The etzem is undefinable. The essence of Hashem is undefinable. It can appear in any way that it wants. Hashem has no limitations. So I, as the receiver, had to do the same thing for both Hashem and for the Torah. I had to begin to understand the Torah is much more than what I thought it was. They are both, they have 70 faces. 70 faces, like saying it has infinite faces. There's no end to it. What, you think the Torah is just a rule book? You think it's just a history book? What are you talking about? It's everything. So, kimu v'kiblu, what does it mean? How do we know? Because they added a mitzvah. They suddenly said, and of course, like you said, a woman added this mitzvah. And she said, and I'm going to add a mitzvah, and it's mamash a mitzvah. And it's a whole day or 2 days that you're going to do everything I say you're going to do. You're going to have mishteh v'simcha, and all these things that even seem a little bit contrary to what the Torah was talking about until now. A bit, okay? It's like suddenly it's all this mishteh v'simcha. The Torah is about mishteh v'simcha. What are you talking about? It's not. It's completely opposite.
What is the mitzvah?
The mitzvah in Purim is to have a mishteh v'simcha, is to have a feast and to be happy.
That was where.
How can you tell us to do this? You know when? 30 years after the temple was destroyed? How can you tell us to do this? What are you talking about? We're all very happy with our misery. And now you're telling us to have fun. To enjoy Hashem, to enjoy... What are you talking about? We're in Galus. There's nothing here. How can you say that? He says, no, v'nafochu. Don't limit Hashem. Don't limit what the Torah is. Oh, you thought the Torah could only be done by men? So comes Esther and says, I'll teach you how to do Torah. Mm-hmm. Also, you have this preconception. I know what the Torah is like. I know what spirituality means. You have no idea. You have one brand of spirituality. You have one face of it. There's another 69 you've never seen. You can't see because it's not you even. You're the receiver here. You have your limitations and what you expect. So expect the unexpected. Go beyond it. That's v'nafoch. If you really love Hashem, if you really love the Torah, you'll let it be, okay, free. Okay? Let it be much more than what you think you can accept. So not saying that that one letter should be uprooted. Of course not. But with the letters that it says and with what it means, it can mean everything. It's not. It can expand into every area of life.
Just come out of Mitzrayim.
What?
At
No,
Har Sinai they couldn't do that.
No, they were limited. They were still limited. That's why there was no Torah Shebaal Peh. Even though Moshe Rabbeinu had received the Torah Shebaal Peh, they didn't know what to do with it. The Torah Shebaal Peh is so surprising that when Moshe Rabbeinu goes to Rabbi Akiva and he sees, he doesn't understand what he's talking about. What are you talking about? Where'd you get this? It's from you. It's from you? Okay, sorry. Maybe he was at least open enough to understand that there's much more to it than meets the eye. There's much more to it than what I... So the duty of the, if you want, the therapist is to contract himself to reveal, meaning to take the infinity that he has to give and to limit it. And the duty of the one who's coming for therapy is the opposite, is to believe that I can be many things that I haven't seen yet.
Potential.
That the potential here is infinite. I'm not, stop living with your self-image. Stop limiting yourself. There's no end to what you can be. But you have to love the therapist. Meaning you have to, that's why you need really a tzaddik in a certain sense. That you love him because he can really give you something that is incredible, that is beyond all description.
But then you have to be able to leave him.
Who says you should leave him? We should stay in touch always.
Don't be dependent on him.
It's not dependency. Why is it dependency?
It could turn into dependency. Like,
It's love. It's not dependency.
love.
Okay? Love here is the capacity to transform myself, to bring something out of nothing.
But isn't it also like in the previous few weeks ago that the counselor has to hold an image of the potential? Remember we spoke about in somewhere of where this time can be and who they can be.
Right.
And that's what we go into the bitul that we learned, where we hold back. We go into the ayin
Right.
of allowing that.
Okay. I want to read it here. So let me read it here.
Where are you reading?
From 5. Okay. According to Hasidic terminology, the type of pleasure held in reserve by the giver, right? I'm holding back until the receiver has appropriately accepted the act of giving is called nachas. Nachat ruach. Nachat ruach she'amalti v'na'asa retzoni. Nachat ruach lefanai. It says this about the korbanot, the sacrifices. Nachat ruach lefanai, meaning it's like Hashem really needs my korbanot. He really needs my korban. He really needs me to bring him a sacrifice. So, what's maniach what satisfies is this ability to limit myself. Okay? By saying to us, "Bring me a sacrifice," Hashem is limiting himself. He's making himself like he's some kind of coin-operated machine. Okay, and I have a need. Like just punch my button and I'm happy. That means limiting. That means to limit myself. Therefore, on joyous occasions such as weddings, bar mitzvahs, or graduations, it is this type of joy that is emphasized in the blessings given those in the role of givers. At such milestones, when the result of ongoing love and nurturing comes to fruition is most apparent, the blessing of nachas is called for. Okay. So this is me being able to limit myself to wait for you to receive what you need to receive. So then it's called nachat ruach. Nachas may appear in both a conscious or unconscious state. So let's skip this. go to in conclusion. It's like two lines down, 2 paragraphs down. In conclusion, we see 3 levels of pleasure as it relates to the givers. The first is the pleasure initiated through the simple act of giving, so that's receiving pleasure just from giving. That's like pleasure without any will. Next is the ability to withhold personal pleasure until the receiver has experienced the pleasure intended by the giver. And lastly is the pleasure born out of the unity of receivers.
A giver and receiver.
It should be of giver and receiver. And this creates a unification between them. This last level, more than the first 2, opens up new possibilities and dimensions in the essence of the giver. No, not exactly. No. Lastly, is the pleasure born out of the unity of receivers is what comes here in the middle, which is like dibuk chaverim. It's like connection between the students themselves. It is of the receivers. Okay. So this last level, meaning that if after a class the Rav goes away, and the students, because of what they all received, so they become much more connected to one another. That's the pleasure born out of the unity of receivers. It's to know that you've caused a group to come together. You've caused something to coalesce. This last level, more than the first 2, opens up new possibilities and dimensions in the essence of the giver, enabling hidden potential to become manifest. And this is a very important thing. That
We know.
I don't know. So it causes the giver to come to new ideas, like stuff that he couldn't think of before. It's the most or chozer, it's the most returning, reflected light from what you give. So, for instance, with children, when you have children, and when you see them together, and that they enjoy each other, and that they're in peace, and they help each other, and that they stick together, there is no greater pleasure for the parents. Even just giving them is not the same thing. It's a completely whole new level of wow. You're amazed by it. So we'll leave it at that. So hopefully this also was connected to Purim.
Yeah, amazing.
Okay, so we had to receive the Torah, we have to really love Hashem. What does it mean to really love Him? So here the meaning is that I can go beyond my limitations. That Hashem doesn't have to give me what I thought He needed to give me. He can be much more than that. He can appear in other ways. The Torah can expand to fill the entire world.